22-year-old graduate student Katie Sepich was walking home from a late Saturday night party. Tonight's investigators have made the case a top priority.
We're interviewing witnesses, family, friends, anybody that may have seen her that night at the bars here in town.
On the night of August 30th, 2003, 22-year-old Katie Sepich had no idea she was living her final hours. The college student at New Mexico State University went to a party with her boyfriend, Joe Bischoff, in Las Cruces, New Mexico, expecting just another Saturday night. After an argument at the party, Katie made a fateful decision. She left alone, walking into the darkness without her purse, phone, or keys. No way to call for help, no way to unlock her door quickly. She was completely vulnerable as she walked through the empty streets of Las Cruces, unaware that a predator was watching. Katie made it to her house near campus, so close to safety she could probably see her bedroom window, but she never made it inside. A stranger materialized from the shadows outside her window, and the nightmare began. Katie fought for her life with desperate strength, scratching and clawing at her attacker, her fingernails tearing into his skin, drawing his blood. But it wasn't enough. He overpowered her, dragging her into the darkness. What happened next was unspeakable. He raped her, then wrapped his hands around her throat and strangled the life from her body. But the horror didn't end with her death. In a cold, calculated attempt to destroy evidence and hide his crime, he set Katie's body on fire, burning her remains in an attempt to erase what he had done. The next morning, August 31st, 2003, Katie's charred body was discovered near a remote desert landfill outside Las Cruces, discarded like garbage. When investigators arrived at the gruesome scene, they found something crucial. Beneath Katie's fingernails were fragments of her killer's skin and traces of his blood, evidence of her final, desperate fight for survival. This DNA profile was immediately uploaded to CODIS, the National DNA Database, and then investigators waited, hoping the monster who did this was already in the system. Days crawled by with no match, then weeks, then months. The investigation took a dark turn when suspicion fell on Katie's boyfriend Joe, forcing the grieving family to wonder if someone they trusted could have done this. Joe was eventually cleared when his DNA didn't match, but that meant the real killer was still out there. A faceless predator who had murdered once and could murder again. Katie's parents, Dave and Jayan Sepich, lived in a waking nightmare, knowing that somewhere their daughter's killer was walking free, perhaps watching the news coverage, perhaps feeling safe. Just 3 months after he murdered Katie, the killer struck again. Not with murder this time, but with aggravated burglary. In November 2003, Gabriel Adrian Avila, a 23-year-old married father, was arrested. He looked ordinary, unremarkable. The kind of person you wouldn't look at twice. Katie had never known him, never seen him, never had any reason to fear him. Their lives had never intersected until he decided to make her his victim. Avila was convicted of burglary in 2004, but here's where the system failed in the most catastrophic way. New Mexico law didn't require DNA collection upon arrest, or even upon conviction for certain crimes. Avila's DNA, the DNA that was already documented under Katie's fingernails, remained uncollected. He was in custody, in the system, and yet invisible to justice. Then he fled before sentencing, a convicted criminal on the run. He was recaptured in 2005, back in custody again, and still no one took his DNA. Katie's killer was caught, released, caught again, and the system let him slip through its fingers over and over while her family suffered, not knowing he had been within reach the entire time.
When Dave got home that night, he told me that when they pulled back that sheet and he had to look at her face, he said that the pain was so intense that he thought he would not be able to take another breath. And no father should ever have to do that. No father should ever have to do that.
Finally, in December 2006, more than 3 years after Katie clawed his skin and drew his blood in her final moments, Gabrielle Avila's DNA was collected and entered into the database. The match was instant, definitive, undeniable. The DNA beneath Katie's fingernails belonged to Gabriel Adrian Avila. For the Sepich family, the revelation was a twisted relief. After 3 years of torment, of seeing his face in every crowd, of jumping at shadows, they finally knew who had killed their daughter. But with that answer came a horror almost as profound as the murder itself. This match could have been made just 3 months after Katie's death. 3 months. If New Mexico had required DNA collection upon arrest, Avila would have been identified immediately after his November 2003 burglary arrest. Katie's family could have had answers in weeks instead of years. Her killer could have been locked away before 2003 ended. Instead, they endured 3 years of anguish while he walked free, knowing what he had done, perhaps reliving it, perhaps hunting again. In 2007, Gabriel Avila pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, rape, kidnapping, and tampering with evidence, receiving a 69-year prison sentence, essentially a life sentence for the life he stole. But for Dave and Jayan Sepich, justice felt hollow. Their daughter was still gone, and they had suffered 3 unnecessary years of torture because of a gap in the law. Most parents would have been crushed by this realization, but the Sepichs transformed their rage and grief into a mission. They would make sure no other family had to endure what they had endured. They became fierce advocates for DNA collection laws, traveling the country with a message that was as urgent as it was simple. DNA must be collected upon felony arrest, not after conviction, because every day of delay is another day a dangerous predator remains unidentified. Another day they could strike again.
My daughter Katie was a 22-year-old graduate student when she was brutally raped and murdered. No fingerprints were left to help identify her killer, but she fought hard for her life, and there was DNA evidence left under her fingernails. Less than 3 months later, the man eventually convicted of her rape and murder had been arrested for an unrelated burglary. If an arrestee DNA law had been in place at that time, a simple cheek swab would have linked him to Katie's murder. Instead, over 3 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent investigating Katie's murder before this man was convicted and incarcerated for the burglary, and his DNA was finally taken and matched to the DNA found on Katie's body.
In 2006, New Mexico passed Katie's Law, the first legislation of its kind requiring DNA collection from individuals arrested for certain violent felonies. But the Sepichs didn't stop at state borders. They took their fight to Washington. In 2010, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Katie Sepich Enhanced DNA Collection Act, providing federal funding and incentives to encourage states to collect DNA samples from individuals arrested for, charged with, or indicted for murder, manslaughter, sexual assault, kidnapping, and abduction. Today, 25 states have enacted Katie's Law or similar programs, and the results speak to how many killers were walking among us, unidentified. Countless cold cases solved, serial offenders caught before they could strike again, innocent people exonerated, and families finally given answers after years of haunting uncertainty. Katie Sepich was only 22 years old when a stranger decided her life was his to take.
Remember the name Katie Sepich. Her name is back in the headlines. On Friday, the Senate passed Katie's Law, a bill that would help states set up DNA databases for people arrested for felonies.
Victory tonight for one New Mexico family trying to make sure their daughter's murder resulted in meaningful action. President Obama has just signed a nationwide version of Katie's Law. New Mexico has already had Katie's Law on the books since 2007. It's named for former NMSU student Katie Sepich.
A bill to expand the state's Katie's Law is also moving forward at the Roundhouse.
It's a bittersweet week for the family of Katie Sepich.
I'm proud to say that 2 days after what would have been Katie's 32nd birthday, the Senate passed our bill unanimously.
The day after Christmas was Katie's birthday. She would have been 32. And so, we still miss her.
day.
She never finished college, never pursued her dreams, never fell in love again, never had children. A monster stole all of that from her in one terrifying night outside her bedroom window. But in her final moments, as she fought with everything she had, Katie collected the evidence that would eventually bring her killer to justice. And through her parents' relentless advocacy, she continues to fight from beyond the grave. Her law has caught predators, solved murders, and saved potential victims who will never know how close they came to becoming another Katie Sepich. That is her legacy.
Today, we are rejoicing that it looks like we have the person who killed our daughter. We're so incredibly grateful for all of the hard work.
A young woman who fought back in the darkness and whose fingernails held the DNA that would change criminal justice in America forever. Katie's law ensures that when victims fight back and collect their attackers' DNA, that evidence won't sit unused for years while killers walk free. It ensures that the system won't fail the next Katie Sepich. That is Katie's gift to the world. Born from unimaginable horror, forged in a parent's grief, and now protecting countless lives across the nation.